All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Maxon. I'm actually the Director of Sales at Journix. Been at the company for a little over 22 years now. So I've been in this time and expense tracking game for a while. And I've kind of gradually grown up through the sales department, account management, direct new sales, and now leading the sales team here at Journix.
All right, well, hey everybody, Chris Haddon here from Greenshades Software. Depending on if you've been on webinars before, you may have heard my voice or even met me before. Been in Greenshades for quite a while, and then I guess since 2009, and then been just working in the payroll and HR space before that for the past about 18 years. Now, when I joined Greenshades, we had not many employees, probably around a dozen or so employees, and so it was a great opportunity to work a lot of different roles over the years. I've done just about every role at Greenshades at this point. It feels like, so I've been on the product development side, quality assurance, compliance, operations, and sales team, and then on the leadership team. So it's been a great opportunity to get exposure to all different aspects of the business, and it's certainly given me a lot of opportunity to work with our customers over the years. So certainly the payroll and HR space is something that I care a lot about, and on the compliance side, I am a certified payroll professional, so I definitely always love talking through compliance. And good news for some of you. Brian's gonna be talking more in just a minute, and but you get to hear my voice a lot too today. So I'll let Brian say a few words about Journix, and then I'll give a little intro on Greenshades, and then we'll get rolling.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So, Journix, just a little bit about the company. Our main mission really is to deliver solutions that enable organizations to track their time. Simple as that. We're actually based out of Austin, Texas. We were one of the first cloud solutions out there in the marketplace about 2 decades ago. We have been around for a little over 25 years now, predominantly helping people track their time on projects, time for payroll, to some extent also expense data. And we really have deep integration experience with many of the standard ERPs from Microsoft Dynamics, Sage Intacct, NetSuite, to even some of the larger guys like SAP and Oracle. But also with several other payroll providers as well.
Yeah, so that was a little bit of info on Journix, and then Greenshades were the other participant here in this discussion today. So at Greenshades, for those of you who are not familiar with us, as listed here, our main mission, the words, to offer payroll, HR, and tax solutions that enhance businesses' utilization of their chosen technology stack, leading to maximum success. So I would say, in short, we help ensure that employees get paid timely and accurately, and we then, of course, make sure that all the payroll taxes and all the fun compliance things related to getting employees paid timely and accurately can be achieved, and we can do this in the business environment that you are working in the operational environment that your business demands. So, similar to Journix, we've been around for a lot of years at this point, celebrated our 20-year anniversary last year. So we got started back in 2002. We started initially really focused on tax filing assistance. So we were really supplementing other payroll applications. We were taking on arguably the most complicated things first. So, again, ensuring payroll tax compliance and generating all of these different returns and formats that jurisdictions across the country would accept. And there's, hundreds and thousands of jurisdictions that we've dealt with over the years. And then over time, just based on customer feedback, as we grew and had the resources to really listen to our customers and continue to add on to our product suite, we got to where we were really helping businesses manage that employee life cycle from hire to retire. So not only do we assist at this point with the payroll taxes, but also full payroll platform, HR, onboarding, again, really hire to retire. We are here to assist our customers manage their overall operations, and again, ultimately ensure that employees get paid timely and accurately. So with that, we're going to start off here with a poll question in just a minute, but again, kind of context for why we're here today. We got a little agenda slide I'll run through here in just a minute, but big picture, payroll and time tracking are really critical, and they are critical in ways that really have much more to do with than just impacting employees getting paid. So I always lead with that and say, hey, we all want to make sure employees get paid timely and accurately, but there's a lot of critical information that's managed in time collection that's more than just, hey, how many hours did the employees work? There's a lot more information that we can collect than just that. And then after, getting employees paid, yes, we'll talk through it on some of these slides. There's a lot of really critical things that impact businesses. And so understanding how these things are linked together and understanding best practices around this are things that are critical to every business. And again, that's something that we all have a lot of expertise in and we'd like to talk through today. So again, stepping back, right, when we're talking about time collection, getting employees paid, and all of these things that ultimately every business deals with in one degree or another, it's more than that, and things can get really complicated really, really quick. And so, I was thinking earlier this morning about this, and personally for me, I'm a big kind of like motorsports, auto racing, like Formula One kind of fan, and typically in the past, I would never even mention these things, but from what I hear, Formula One's actually getting quite popular in the United States, and certainly they have a race in Austin, Texas, where Journix is, so it's kind of relevant. So I was thinking about this and the aspect of, anytime I watch cars racing on a track, could be Formula One or anything else, if they crash into the wall, generally, whatever went wrong, it didn't go wrong right before they hit the wall, right? It went wrong way before that. They made some error and then they tried to overcorrect, or they, took the line at the wrong angle, and so they try to make an adjustment and they just can never quite catch up because they're going so fast. Once they make that error early on, 2 corners before they crash, they just can't ever quite get caught up, and it ends up leading to a really bad place, such as running into a wall. The same thing here really can be said with the snowball effect when we're talking about payroll, and how important it is when an error happens, how important it is to either avoid it, obviously, or correct it as soon as possible, because one mistake can just kind of lead into another mistake and end up just creating a really bad situation, right? So when we are not correctly capturing time, there's some sort of mistake, okay, that can lead, bad data making its way to payroll. If bad data makes its way to payroll, then that can have an impact on the employee's paycheck, which there are issues, of course, that can be a result from that, which we'll talk through. Typically then that leads to confusion. Someone's having to jump in, make some sort of corrective action. And then once you're making that corrective action, then now all of a sudden you've got some kind of manual adjustments that need to occur. And maybe you're adjusting one area, but you forgot there's 3 other areas that need to be manually adjusted. And the next thing you know, now you've got multiple reports that are inaccurate. You've got other systems that aren't accurate. And now it's hitting downstream to the budgeting systems and the forecasting systems. It can really have an impact overall on the future business operation. So that's really why, and again, we'll go into more detail on this, but that's really why some of these things are so important, because they just all impact each other so heavily. And once one mistake happens, it really has an impact on so many different aspects of the business. So today's agenda, right? Overall, really, we want to talk through kind of best practices and solutions for project accounting, to help improve profitability and increase business success. So specifically, we'll talk about ensuring accurate payroll, right? How do you do that? Integrating time tracking, and then ultimately leveraging project accounting through a mix of just some kind of best practices and also just examples that we have experienced over the years. So just to start with here, when we're thinking about the goal of achieving business success, right? I mean, all companies are in business for one reason or another. There's some kind of goal that we all have. So in order to get there, there's again a lot of things that have to happen correctly. So when we're thinking about the ability to rely on data, we need to make sure that time and attendance data is complete and accurate, right? If that information is wrong, we've already talked about, hey, that can have some downstream impacts. We need to make sure that payroll, of course, is on time, right? None of us like getting paid incorrectly or not getting paid at all. And I don't have time to go into today. I've talked about it in other webinars, and I can save the story for another day, but I've definitely got some stories in my life on both sides of it where employees either weren't paid or I was not paid, and it's never a fun thing to deal with at all. But then, if we can do those two things right, if we can ensure that time and attendance is accurate, and if we can complete payroll accurately, then that opens up additional doors to the business to really leverage cost and project accounting so that we actually can make really good decisions and make decisions that truly can have a meaningful change in the operation, right? But without those things happening accurately, we really can't do any of that. So the first tip, if you will, is ensuring accurate payroll. So obviously we all know that's important. Okay, I mean, I think just in a general sense, I think we can all recognize that yes, payroll needs to be accurate, and that's going to be really important. But it's not as simple as just saying, hey, it's important for payroll to be accurate because we want to make sure that employees get accurate paychecks. Payroll is a massive portion of most organizational expenses. So most organizations, their payroll expense is really high, right? Getting our workers paid, that's where so much of the money is going to. So obviously, if we get that wrong, that can definitely have a significant impact on the financial stability of the organization. But then, of course, there are real human beings on the other side of that paycheck. I think that certainly over the last few years, there's been so much discussion in the news around employee turnover and keeping employees happy, and especially the last 18 months or so, the importance of employee satisfaction. And we've talked about it in webinars and blogs and all sorts of different posts. We've shared all kinds of stats, but the significant impact that it has on employees when they are paid incorrectly, I mean, it's just, it truly can't be understated, right? Employees, when they get underpaid or they get paid inaccurate amounts, it has a massive impact on the trust for their organization. And sometimes it's just impossible to ever really overcome that. So you got the financial aspect to the business, you've got the trust with employees. Obviously, there's compliance that's really important. And so I mentioned in my intro, hey, compliance is a really big thing. For me, it's something that I really am interested in and love working with our customers on, but it's complicated, right? There are so many different rules that are out there for the protection of workers, but also, protection of businesses in some cases. And so it's important that those legal obligations are met. And if payroll's incorrect, that can have an impact on those obligations. And then just finally increased in productivity, right? So again, anytime we have anything that's inaccurate, there's cleanup that has to happen. And that can definitely have an impact on, again, either that employee's productivity, they got paid incorrectly, now they're having to chase down what's going on, or the payroll professional, when that employee shows up and says, hey, I got paid wrong, now they're having to go through, figure out what went wrong and update a bunch of systems. So the goal is to avoid that, of course. So how can we do that, right? We've identified, yes, it's important. So what can we do to avoid that? So to start with, here's some steps to keep in mind. So consolidating payroll related data. So ideally having a kind of a centralized environment or a centralized system where we can keep that information together, trying to minimize multiple systems having to be at play. Certainly if there are multiple systems, then of course keeping those things integrated, but if possible, doing as much as you can in a single system is preferred. Next thing, keeping employee records up to date. And this is something that is easier now than ever before with technology, but it's still really easy for these records to get out of date really quickly. And I always think back, again, prior to coming to Greenshades and being more in kind of like a food type restaurant environment, and managing payroll and W-2s in that environment with the turnover was always so crazy. And those W-2s, trying to issue them out to employees by the end of the year, the odds that we had an accurate employee address for an employee that worked for 2 weeks in January, trying to issue them a W-2 the following January, I mean, the number of W-2s that came back undelivered was just crazy. And so, keeping in touch with those employees, at least ensuring on their last day of work that those employee records are up to date. But even employees that work within the organization and that continue to stay around, it's really easy for that information to get out of date. And so having ideally a way for the employees to engage with that information directly and review that information and be able to keep it up to date in a self-service environment, that's certainly ideal. Completing payroll reconciliations regularly. So that's something that, again, when talking with Greenshades users or prospective users, when we're going through our payroll product, that's something that I'm always highlighting and talking about, because as a payroll professional, that's definitely something that most payroll professionals are thinking about. And it's a really important thing to keep in mind that, hey, you want to do those reconciliations. You want to try to catch those mistakes as early as often, because the sooner we can catch those mistakes, the sooner we can catch those discrepancies, the fewer long-term issues that that will be resulted from that. So we can get ahead of that as early as possible. That's ideal, and the best way to do that is through doing your reconciliations and following those standard payroll best practices. And then, of course, ensuring compliance with labor laws. Right. So we're doing a kind of a book club right now for the leadership team is at Greenshades. And one of the books that we're reading right now is really geared more towards small businesses, but I was just reading yesterday, and in the chapter was talking all about compliance and how especially startup companies, it's really easy to be thinking about, okay, well, I'm really focused on doing whatever it is that I went into business for, right? I've got some kind of goal that I'm trying to achieve as an organization. The last thing I'm thinking about is, compliance and sort of labor requirements. And as you grow, those labor laws just increase in complexity. And depending on what state you're in, right? There are laws at the state level that get rather complicated. And in some cases, even that, city or local jurisdiction that you operate in can get really complicated. And sometimes you have a headquartered in one state, but you've got employees in other states, and the states that they're working from impact those compliance regulations. So making sure that you're keeping up with those, or you're partnering with an organization that does, is certainly really important. And then, reducing manual entry, right? So just trying to cut down on that potential human error, ideally leveraging some kind of, computer or something, for example, for that. And then finally, integrating payroll with your time tracking system. So as we're thinking about, again, ensuring that those employees are getting paid, we need to make sure that the hours being collected, the hours that employee has actually worked, ideally having that information flow seamlessly into payroll is just going to cut down on the number of errors that we're ultimately going to run into. And so we'll have another poll question here that's going to be queued up here in just a moment, but really the second tip, if you will, that we want to be thinking about today is, again, integrating that time tracking, right? So making sure that you have a system in place that will allow those hours ideally to seamlessly flow from that time and attendance system into payroll to cut down on the potential of those user errors. So I've already spoken a little bit to these, but just to again, go through these in more detail. So the benefits of automating time and attendance data, making its way to payroll. First and foremost, just reducing the data entry errors and allowing that to save time. So again, this is, we did an automation webinar not too long ago and talked a lot about this, but anytime a human has to get involved into key information from one cell into another cell, they're just rekeying information, there's always an opportunity for error. Not to mention, it's just typically like really boring work. So most people don't want to have to operate in that kind of environment. But again, it's really, really easy to have data entry errors. So obviously having an integrated system, we can cut down on that. Minimizing delays in payroll processing. So this is really important when you're thinking about, especially if there's some type of change that's identified, because if you have a system that's not integrated, I feel like this kind of scenario happens so often where you collect all your timesheets, you have all your hours, you say, great, looks good. Maybe you can export that and do, something with that, and you start keying it into the payroll system, and you get along, you say, okay, great, things look good. And then you get a call from that manager that says, hey, hold on, I forgot to put in this time card, or I just remembered, Susie didn't actually work last Tuesday. I need to make an adjustment to that, or actually, they didn't work a full day, they took 4 hours of PTO. There's some kind of adjustment that needs to occur. And now, you're about to run payroll. You don't want all the checks to be late. So you're trying to scramble, make those adjustments on the fly. Again, that can lead to data errors, or that can just delay the process of being able to run payroll. And obviously, worst case would be that employees would get paid late. But even if they still get paid on time, maybe you're having to work late or whatever to make up for that additional time that you're having to spend on that. So just being able to cut down on those delays, being able to get that data in as quickly as possible, and certainly a value to that. Of course, accuracy, right? So data entry errors can be, can certainly come up with this, but even, in some cases, it's not even that, hey, the hours were miskeyed, but it could be, what code the employee worked under, right? There might be a scenario, which is certainly not uncommon for many businesses that we work with. This is a very regularly what we see, where they have employees that work, different positions at different pay rates, for example, or they have different shifts where they're paid at different pay rates. And so it's not as simple as just saying, hey, they work 10 hours, so I'm going to plug 10 hours into payroll and everything will work out fine. A lot of times there's really that kind of nuanced information that's collected. And so we want to make sure that all of that gets correctly back into payroll. Otherwise, the employee might get paid for the total number of hours correctly, but their rate of pay might be incorrect, for example. So making sure that all of the information is accurate, not, again, just the total number of hours that the employee is being paid, and then improved reporting. So the more detail that we can get being available to payroll professionals or managers or whoever may be consuming this information, and when we're thinking about the business overall, that labor cost is so critical and such a high expense for an organization. Being able to get details as far as what's actually going on and being able to allow managers or directors to make more kind of real-time decisions, more insightful decisions, the more data they have, the better. And again, when you can have that integrated system, that definitely allows for the opportunity to do that type of reporting. So as we're thinking through this, again, we're talking about this is important. We've talked about why it's important. So, what are some steps that we need to think about to make this happen? So implementing a centralized time tracking system. So again, having ideally a single system for time collection that's doing more than just tracking those hours. And so I think along with the kind of the name of this webinar, right, with the project accounting, the goal in so many scenarios is to be able to say, hey, we not only want to know how many hours the employee worked and what their pay rate is, but we also want to know what they actually were working on. Were they working on a particular client? Maybe there's some billable hours there. Were they working on time going towards a particular project that we need to track for that? I know for myself, that's definitely been something that I've dealt with in the past on more kind of the operation side and the product development side, where we have different projects that we're working towards, and we want to be able to properly document, how many hours the developer is working on, this particular new feature versus this other one. Having that information available at the time tracking level allows not only the employee's rate of pay to be correct, but also just the other decisions that we can make as an organization for budgeting purposes that can come out of that. Certainly then synchronizing that data with the payroll system in real time. Again, if there are any changes, if there's an opportunity to, again, cut down on any delays there, that is something that we absolutely want to be able to do. Any kind of automated workflows. So when you're thinking about, working with two different systems and wanting to make sure that integration is solid, having those automated workflows in place can definitely, again, help increase the likelihood of success, just to make sure that all the work doesn't fall on one individual, for example, to improve that time, so that as these employees are submitting the time, instead of having the same person, of course, be the one that's responsible for reviewing that before it gets sent to payroll. Obviously, if you can farm that out to the managers, for example, like those direct supervisors are going to have much more understanding on the accuracy of that data than the payroll professional, for example, will, because if I'm looking at, at Greenshades, even the size that we are, 200 or so employees, if I'm looking at an employee's time in a different department, I have no idea if that's accurate or not. I don't know what projects they're working on and all of that. So having those automated workflows built in so that the time can be routed to the appropriate individuals that can actually ensure accuracy for that, that is something that, is definitely, I would think, a must-have. Having an opportunity to conduct regular data audits. Same thing with like payroll reconciliations, but really here as well, again, being able to report on this data and get access to the key information that you need to ensure that this underlying data is accurate and what you're expecting. And then empowering employees with the self-service portal. So that's something we've talked a little bit about so far, but again, having something in place for the employees and then the managers to have access to this information so they can help ensure that things are accurate, can be that kind of firsthand experience that they can have. They can help call out mistakes. And so giving them the opportunity to do that and be able to view that information is very important. And then finally, integrating that time tracking with those project accounting tools. And so here in just a minute, I'm going to hand it off here to Brian. So good news, you can hear a different voice for a little bit, and we'll talk a little bit about leveraging project accounting. But again, having a system where you can do all of that is critical. And again, even thinking for me in previous roles in the past, there were scenarios where I've had employees who were different portions of their time should have been allocated to different departments on a temporary basis. And long story short, I was running into situations when we didn't have a fully integrated system that was including that project accounting. I ultimately made some bad budgeting decisions because I didn't have real-time access to know what in fact that employee actually was working off of. So I was making decisions based off what allocation I thought would be a month ago when we were doing planning versus actually knowing how many hours and what projects that employee's time was actually going to. So I had effectively under budgeted and then had to make up for that later on. So as a department head, that was a really difficult thing to try to make up for. So if I'd had access to that in real time, that certainly would have made things much better. So absolutely, if you can find a system like that, that's definitely something we would recommend. So we're going to, again, Brian's going to chat here, and we're gonna just have a poll question. But again, this is the expert tip on leveraging project accounting. So Brian, you wanna take it away from here?
I'll take it away, thanks, Chris. Yeah, so I'm here really to talk about the project accounting side of the operations. Chris has talked a lot about how critical it is to have accurate on-time payroll. This is more around profitability analysis, project cost accounting, client billing through project accounting processes. We're talking about at a high level project accounting. One of the with accurate project time tracking and payroll data, some of the obvious benefits here is that you can keep up to date on your project costs and budget overruns. So having real-time time tracking on projects is going to allow you to make adjustments faster, to allow you to make better business decisions really before it's too late. You can see out there to the right, according to the Project Management Institute, 52% of projects experience scope creep. And so that's a big risk. If you're talking about trying to control your cost, increase your profitability, if you don't have that real-time data on your time on projects, it's really hard to make those critical business decisions quickly. The second benefit is around time entry compliance. And by compliance, what we really mean is that people are entering their time on their projects accurately and on time. This is especially important when you're talking about, let's say, like a professional services type organization where you're tracking time on client projects because you want to be able to invoice and bill those customers for the time that you're recording. Getting accurate invoices out, timely fashion is really going to help reduce your time to cash, right? And so especially in certain economies, a big thing you're trying to do is increase profitability, control your costs, but also reduce that time it is to get that cash back in to your organization so you can invest that wisely throughout the organization. The third benefit, this is especially important for people that do R&D type work. So pharmaceutical type organizations, software development, any type of organization that can claim R&D tax credits. It's really critical to be able to track your time on projects because those reports that you're able to generate on the time that people spent on those R&D projects is required to be able to support those claims for those R&D tax credits. In my experience, we've got a pretty large pharmaceutical organization that uses Journix primarily for R&D tax credits, and we're talking about like 7-figure type R&D tax credits. So if you have the ability to be able to claim that based on the type of organization that you are, it's a must-have to be able to track your time on projects so that you can claim that R&D tax credit and be able to have the influx of money into the organization. And then really the fourth benefit is really trying to increase efficiencies and reduce your cost around integration. So you've got these great payroll solutions like Greenshades. You may have a great ERP solution like Microsoft Dynamics or Sage Intacct or Oracle NetSuite. And being able to integrate all of those solutions together is really going to create a lot of efficiencies. It's going to reduce your cost. It's going to eliminate or at least greatly reduce errors that cause from manual data entry from all of these disparate systems. It's going to be able to help you update your time tracking systems with accurate data so that people record their time against the appropriate projects. It's really just going to make things a lot more fluid and create a lot of efficiencies within the organization. And so we talked about some of the benefits of leveraging project accounting. And so if we get into talking about some of the best practices, obviously one of those is to be able to utilize a robust project accounting system. And if you're able to implement a project accounting system that can facilitate real-time tracking of project progress, expenses, resource utilization, it's really going to lead to more accurate financial data. And so that's, again, critical for being able to make decisions around, can we invest in more resources down the pipeline to help grow the business? Maybe you're talking about wanting to make some acquisitions of another company. Being able to have a robust project accounting system in place is really just critical to have that happen. The next best practice is really being able to clearly define the scope and goals. And so if you can outline your objectives, timelines, budgets, having precise project scope provides a foundation really for accurate financial planning and tracking. So it's really important to be able to define that stuff up front, and so that you can make adjustments throughout the process and make sure you don't kind of get out of line with what your project scope and goals are, thereby reducing your profitability. The third best practice we recommend is to be able to conduct regular financial reviews. And so being able to have all of this data in real time and having consistent monitoring allows for timely corrective actions, ensuring that projects again stay within budgetary constraints. These reviews also really provide valuable insights into areas of improvement. So let's say we scoped out a project that was similar like this maybe 6 months ago. We've got a similar project coming down the pipeline. Learning from our experiences from doing those financial reviews on those other projects really helps us to make informed decisions for the future on future projects that are coming down the pipeline. Fourth best practice really I would recommend, and Chris has touched on this a little bit, is standardizing your labor codes, right? Using consistent labor codes and processes to attribute labor correctly and consistently across your organization really simplifies the tracking and reporting, and it really allows for easy comparison and analysis for similar projects, similar payroll runs. And so just having that standardized labor code is something that's very important and something that we certainly recommend as a best practice. And then finally, really, I touched on these a little bit, and Chris has as well, but time tracking and expenses accurately and integrating with other financial systems. So if you can't implement a reliable time tracking system that accurately records employees' hours spent, not only for payroll, but on your projects and project-related expenses, this data really forms the basis for precise cost accounting, cost allocation, client billing. And then certainly the best practice that we've talked about already in the past here is integrating with other financial systems, whether that be your ERP system, maybe your project management system, really helps to drive profitability, controls cost, make sure that your invoices are getting out the door accurately and on time so you can reduce that time to cash. Perfect, thanks, Chris. So, I mean, as you guys know, right, nobody wants to fill out a timesheet. So the easier we can make this for everybody, the more accurate it will be, the more timely people will fill out a timesheet. And so I'm going to give you guys just sort of the 5-minute overview here of Journix. And basically, this is our basic timesheet. Along this left-hand side are some drop-down menus that you can configure. Ideally, we're pulling all of this data in from your payroll and or ERP solution. But basically, from these drop-down menus, people can pick what projects they're working on, potentially what task or activity. Is this regular time, PTO, sick time, billable, non-billable time? Just say enter 4 hours against that project or job, pick a different job here, 4 hours. I can simply hit the save button. So again, very simple, very intuitive, where it's not going to be accurate. Basic process here is I can fill out my timesheet for the period, which could be weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, and I can go ahead and submit that timesheet for approval. In addition to tracking time on your projects, the core Journix product can do things like tracking and validating against time off balances. Journix can do what we call a leave request, which is to request time off in advance. That can be sent through a workflow process. There are data validation rules that can be applied to this time to increase accuracy of the data. There's also the idea of creating favorites so that people can simply enter their time against their favorites that are saved, as opposed to going to the drop-down menu and selecting that every time. Again, the whole idea being to simplify the time entry process against projects and time for payroll so that it is on time and accurate. Once that time is entered by employees, managers can receive email notifications. We can send reminder emails to employees to fill out their timesheets on time. But managers can then come into a system like Journix and be able to approve their sheets. So managers can review the sheets at the summary level. They can choose these timesheets and go ahead and approve them, reject them back to the employee to ask them to make changes. Managers can reopen timesheets to make changes on behalf of the employee. You can also click on the period link, which basically allows you to be able to view this timesheet in all of the detail. Again, approving that, rejecting that. You can have multiple levels of approval. So if Chris approves my timesheet first, and then maybe it goes to somebody in accounting or payroll as a second level approval, you can have multiple levels of approval here. We also have the ability to approve time at either the sheet level or at a project level. So if I'm project manager A and I only need to see and review and approve time on my project, you can have that approval on timesheets and also by project. So those different approval tracks are available within Journix as well. Then we're talking about sort of natively reporting on that data. Journix does have its own reporting engine built into it. One of those reporting concepts is the ability to build out a reporting dashboard. And so everybody can build their own version of their dashboard. You can see in my example, my dashboard consists of my approvals here at the top. And then I just built out a couple different chart types here, a couple bar charts. This is my total hours by project, by activity, a couple different pie charts that show that same data. Within any of the charts on your dashboards within Journix is the actual report that's providing that data. So you can see this is all the time that's been entered into the system for the month of August. Within Journix, you can modify any of these standard reports, obviously picking a different date range for that report. You could filter out specific projects, activities, people, pay codes. Once you choose the data that you want to report on, you can then pick and choose how that gets displayed on the screen. So if I wanted to see this data subtotal by, say, project and then by person, I can also then control the columns that appear in that report. So I can remove columns. I can switch the order from left to right. Those columns appear in this report. And I'll save and run that same exact report. Now you can see this is subtotal by job and then by person within that. Any of these standard reports with the Journix can export to Excel. by just clicking that simple button there. So if we have any accountants on the call here, I know a lot of accounting folks like to use Excel to analyze data. So more importantly, what I want to show you guys is because we have a lot of people that like to use Excel to analyze data, many years ago, we built an Excel plugin that we call ReportLink. ReportLink is basically using our API to connect Excel directly with the Journix database. So what I would do, this is the link to that demo site we've just been looking at. I would pick a date range for the time information that I care about. I would enter my login and password to Journix because it's going to respect my permission levels within the application. But once I enter in my credentials, the link to Journix, the date range for the time information that I care about, when I click this refresh button and put in my password, it's going to go into the Journix database and pull in all the raw time data that falls into this date range. So let's say I'm a pivot table person here. I can just insert one of those. Because this is connected up to Journix right now, all the fields from my field list would be all the fields from Journix. So say I've got my projects, I've got my people, got any sort of project user attributes like custom fields, and of course I've got my hours. And so the whole idea behind this reporting feature is you could build the 3 or 4 reports that you use on a pretty regular basis in Excel. Pivot table reports, worksheet reports, all the power of Excel. And anytime you want to update those reports, you can just come over to this Journix tab, update your date range and click this refresh button. It would update all of your reports at the same time because what it's really doing is updating the raw data set behind those reports. So again, people that like to use Excel to analyze data, it's a pretty cool reporting feature that Journix offers natively out of the box. If we have any other folks on the line here that use third-party reporting tools like a Power BI or a Tableau, we have the same API key connection methodology for those third-party reporting tools that we do with Excel.
Thanks for running through that, Brian. So yeah, just looking at the time, I know we don't have too much longer. So the last thing from a demo perspective, just wanted to briefly show Greenshades, and then we've got some slides that we will close on. But you know, the big thing, kind of completing that cycle, right? We've been talking a lot in this discussion that time tracking is really important for a variety of reasons. In part, because we want to make sure we're collecting those hours and codes correctly so that employees can get paid correctly. And then we also want to make sure that we can understand the total cost for these different projects that employees are working in. So between a combination of Greenshades and Journix, that is possible, right? So as Brian just went through, the employees are able to collect their time in an efficient way and you know, providing the parameters that are laid out for them. And then that information for the selected periods will flow into Greenshades. The pay runs will be generated here. The respective employees will be loaded in here. And then based on how all the setup is, we'll have all of our code, you know, earning code set up and our job code set up and all of that, so that the pay run will consume that information, so that ultimately every transaction that ends up in a Greenshades pay run, depending on how, you know, the allocation is structured, all of that information will be flowing into the pay run, so that those earnings amount that employee is earning, and ultimately the cost of that employee, will be allocated to the appropriate jobs or clients or projects. You know, we can have as many codes as we need to tie this back to, so that as we continue to do our just normal payroll operation, right? From a payroll perspective, nothing changes. We just do our normal payroll operation, but we can consume that additional kind of more ancillary information, like the jobs information, like the projects or the client information, so that as we do our normal payroll operation, we can process the payroll, get the employee paid, still produce you know, all of the checks for the employees, but all of those earnings will be tied back to those jobs, so that then we can generate our, you know, custom reports and even tie this back to splits for impacting the financials and tie it back to the general ledger, so that we can get into that true cost accounting, so that not only we can understand, you know, the hours that an employees have allocated to different projects, which is very, very important, but then we can also take that actual costing data, feed that back into the financial system, so that we can do our cost allocation there as well. And so there's all sorts of settings and everything that we could jump through. Obviously, for the sake of time, I won't run into all of that today. Be happy to follow up in more detail at a later date to cover any of that in more detail. But again, normal payroll operations will pick up from here. We process our payroll. The checks are generated, right? We're cutting the checks to the employees, getting those workers paid. And then, of course, as mentioned earlier, with the compliance side of things, all those taxes are going to be taken care of. So obviously getting the taxes, the liability paid to the various tax jurisdictions, and then ultimately getting all of those various tax returns submitted to the appropriate agencies. All of that will pick up as normal. But when using both Journix and Greenshades, then we can ultimately get the payroll process, but then still leverage all that additional benefit and insights that can come out of having that holistic end-to-end solution. So with that in mind, I'll let Brian say a couple words here on this, just a case study to highlight, and then we'll wrap things up.
Yeah, I love the story, mainly because it just proves out that we're delivering value to our customers, right? It's not just people paying us for a piece of software, but we're really delivering value. So Muscatine Power and Water, they're a power and water authority out in Iowa. And they had about 300 employees that were using paper timesheets. They had to manually send those out in the field, manually collect those, and they were keying that in to Microsoft Dynamics GP for their cost accounting purposes and payroll. And they had 7 office staff that were required to chase down missing timesheets, fix bad data, manually calculate overtime, and like I said, hand key this into Microsoft Dynamics. And so by implementing a solution like Journix and automating their manual processes, you can see here they were able to reduce the time to process payroll from a week down to 1 day. And so I think that's a pretty incredible story, and it's something that I think we can deliver value together as a partnership between Journix and Greenshades going forward as well.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome story, and I feel like there's going to be so many more of those to come. Again, talking about some of these best practices that we've gone through today, there's so many opportunities for improvements, and again, I'm just having flashbacks as you're talking about on the development side and for the tax purposes, and being able to split all that out, and just some of the crazy manual work that I used to personally do to try to keep up with all that with all the software engineers. So having a dedicated system for that is a much better experience. So just kind of in closing, again, common goals, exceptional values, right, between Greenshades and Journix. So the workflow efficiencies that we've talked about today, right, improving the data accuracy, ultimately reducing cost, saving money is always a positive thing, and then improving the overall billing process is really important. So we talked a lot about today from a Greenshades perspective, right? We kind of focused primarily there in that really brief demo, which is really around payroll, right? Getting those employees paid timely and accurately. But as I always say, there's a lot of things that have to happen leading up into that point. So really on the HR side, all the employee onboarding, managing the overall kind of needs of the business, learning management, integrating with applicant tracking systems, managing our employee certifications and licenses, obviously benefits enrollment and Affordable Care Act compliance, and managing open enrollment. Obviously on the compliance side, all the taxes, right, and payroll taxes being withheld automatically, and all that being managed by Greenshades, and then doing all the tax reporting. There's a lot that again, combination of that time and attendance from Journix, and along with all the payroll and HR related operations. And then Greenshades, really truly can solve for that entire employee lifecycle from hire to retire, while also ensuring the rest of the business has the information that they need to make critical decisions.
Yeah, and thanks, Chris. And so just real briefly here, I kind of focused on the project cost accounting, client billing side of the operations, but just wanted to make awareness that as a time tracking company, which is what Journix is, there are 3 core products that we support. It's our JX product, which is more time on projects, the PX, which is around resource capacity planning, and our CX product is more of the traditional time and attendance, time for payroll with web punch, mobile punch, hardware capabilities, facial recognition, thumbprint, biometric, swipe card, things like that. So happy to dig into those further, just being thoughtful of time if anybody has any interest after the webinar.
Thank you again, both Brian and Chris. Thank you for your time today and presenting this to our audience. I think there were some helpful nuggets in there, and we appreciate your time this afternoon. Have a great day, everyone.